You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
And away we go for the Tuesday edition of Leafs Morning Take, the annual tradition here on the show where we react and probably overreact to locker cleanout day. It is Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill. What's going on, Rosie?
No overreactions, Nick. No overreactions. Just reactions are going to be heated enough, I imagine, this time of year. As usual.
I think so. I had a bit of a reaction to watching Boston and Florida last night. I turned it on. I'm like, man, it just hit a bit differently. And then you watch that game, you watch it unfold. The Panthers score the first goal, and then Boston just storms with 5 in a row, and you're like, damn it, you know?
So what do you like? Does that, if Boston cleans them out, does that make you feel better or worse? I can't really decide.
Yeah, to me, it's Groundhog Day, where it's like it seems like every goalie the Maple Leafs play goes on this historic run. Like last year was Bobrovsky. Now it feels like Jeremy Swayman is going to go on some sort of run here, man. Like watching that game, I'm like, what has gotten into this guy where he's making like the most ridiculous saves ever? Not to say he wasn't already like an upper echelon goalie. He is really rapidly evolving and ascending into one of those guys. But there's just something about playing the Leafs and goalies catching fire.
Yeah, tell me about it. And like the Leafs couldn't score 5 on Bobrovsky last year, and they just like same shit, right? And like the Bruins score 5 on Bobrovsky, but they couldn't score 5 on Samsonov. Like I guess they did one game, but like Jesus, man, it's just never. It just feels like a curse, man. Like that's why it's so hard to dissect in those locker room cleanout days. And like, are they close? Are they not even on the planet? Like everyone's got their different opinion, but it's crazy because like technically what should be happening is X, but what always happens is Y, and none of it makes sense. And everyone's heartbroken and pissed off. It's just a crazy market, man. Crazy and frustrating for anyone that follows this goddamn team.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's extremely difficult to dissect. I think you would tend to agree. Everybody plays everybody differently. It just seems like the Leafs run into the hot goalie every year. They run into a key contributor. I don't know if you watched the beginning of that game, but David Pastrnak, obviously ignited by the game-winning goal. He was all over the place to start that game against the Florida Panthers. And I really felt like there was a letdown, too, from Game 7 and the Panthers in the first round to watching Game 1 here in round 2, where the Panthers, it was evident it looked like a team that hadn't played in like a week. And I think Boston riding the emotion of Game 7, I thought it was a slow start. But nonetheless, it's just so difficult to watch when, you know, the Leafs were one shot away from being in that game.
I know it's crazy to think they would have been playing like yesterday. Someone's like, are you going to watch that Boston Florida game? And I'm like, holy crap, that's tonight. Like, I couldn't believe the Leafs were going to be playing if they scored one more goal. But yeah, it is, oh God. Yeah, it's crazy. And that's what you think about when if you finish a team or sweep, to sit there and wait is obvious. Like oftentimes it's like, God damn, that's too much time in between, because I don't know, there's something about like, you know how you go out and do like a workout or something, and then you kind of stop and you cool off and you kind of stiffen up, and then you go out and try to hammer it again. Like, no, that doesn't work. But if you're like right in the middle of it and you got your sweat on, and I know I'm talking about one day, but you get right back into it and you're in the swing of things, you're in the mold, you're in the groove. The Boston Bruins are rocking and rolling, and they just hammered it off yesterday, where I think you got to knock the rust off and get the old grease going again if you're the Florida Panthers. So that's kind of always a bad worry that teams have when they sweep and they got to wait too long for a series. But I don't even know why we're talking about it. I could give a shit about that series.
You're right. Personally, I think that's the most grueling part of the Stanley Cup playoffs. I did want to talk a bit about Travis Green, the former Toronto Maple Leaf, ending up, it sounds like, as the head coach of the Ottawa Senators, which I think is always fascinating to begin with. You always are conscious, I think, in this market, who's running the show down the road for the Sens. But the fact that it's a former Leaf is just sort of funny to me.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. He's going to get a kick at the can. The interesting part of that to me was, I know they kind of had talks with Craig Berube and whatnot. Obviously, you would think Berube would be a higher choice than Green. So that must lead you to believe that Berube shook it off and said, no thanks. Why is that? Is he waiting? You know, big Canadian market. You know, I think he even said on our show, like, that would be a neat opportunity, but he must have turned it down. So more reason to speculate that, let's be honest, potentially he could come to Toronto.
We have a super chat from Mike Kahn, sort of talking about Craig Berube, and appreciate this. Sends us $2. Would a Berube system tempt use to run it back? Do you think just making the change, a coaching change alone, running it back with the core four and the same nucleus, adding a new coach, would that make a difference, Rosie?
Oh, I don't know. Nobody knows, but I wouldn't put it past a lot of the fears right now while Leafs Nation is hot under the collar is that they're not going to make a lot of changes. It is a pretty big deal to, fire Shanahan, to trade Marner, to trade Riley, and all the knee-jerk reactions that I myself have had and a lot of people have had. Like, it doesn't happen overnight, and, Tree Living hasn't been here all that long. And you look, I could see them being like, well, we just need a culture change. We need some accountability. We've seen these guys can play at a certain level. We just got to get someone that can keep them there. Oh, Lord, maybe. They very well could. They could think that's a big enough change. And, ownership is new. Like a lot of new faces saying, no, I just don't think they've done it right. It's almost like, it reminds me of like people that defend like communism or socialism. No, it's good. It just hasn't been done properly yet. It's like, oh my God. So we'll see, man. But a lot of changes potentially on the horizon, or else lack of changes, which will cause mass opinion and speculation as well. So we'll see. But I think the most guaranteed thing is that Keefe is gone, and after that, we will see.
Tell you what, we're going to get to the bottom of everything, or at least attempt to do so, with Frank Seravalli, NHL insider for Daily Faceoff. He's coming up in about 25 minutes from now. Don't forget to follow us on social media, namely X, at the Golden Muzzy for me, at J_D_Rosehill for Rosie's. Had some fantastic thoughts as of late, and that will continue here into the offseason. It's, people always make light of the Maple Leafs, but find me a more polarizing team when it comes to anything and everything, Rosie. Like yesterday, to document that on social media, the rest of the hockey world was it as well. It just shows you how big this market truly is.
Oh, I know. Like everybody, like that kid in Winnipeg, like can't stop talking about the Leafs. I got buddies that just despise the Leafs and they can't stop talking about it. And they're sending me clips that I haven't even seen. And it's like, they're super polarizing, man. And they're very interesting. They're very cool. Like that organization is so fucking badass, man. It's so big. It's so historic. And then add on the fact that it's just so much losing and so much heartbreak. And, the people that don't like them love to see that. The people that do like them, get their hopes up and get crushed every year. It's very polarizing, man. And it's the biggest city in Canada. It's the biggest market. It's an original six. I think it's the coolest franchise, one of the coolest ones in the world. And part of that is the fact that they've struggled so mightily for so long. So yeah, they're polarizing. All right. And today's no exception to that.
Yeah, it's the same old same. And I always recall every time of year in this springtime when it's postmortem following another first round exit, same old story on social media. At the Leafs Nation 401 here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and don't forget to pop by theleafsnation.com. Folks over there doing a fantastic job as per usual, getting you set for buckle up. It's going to be a roller coaster week in this market. If you recall, last year at this time, the whole Kyle Dubas saga and situation went down. So could only wonder what's going to transpire over the next couple of days. The opening segment is brought to you by Greta Bar YYZ. For a good time, find Greta, 590 King Street West. Weekly specials, live sports, over 60-plus arcade games. Let the games begin. Go big. Go to Greta Bar YYZ. We'll start with the big news, I think, yesterday afternoon. And that's the fact that management, Rosie, was supposed to talk on Thursday. It's now been moved to Friday. And the keynote is that it's going to be Keith Pelly, Brendan Shanahan, and Brad Treliving addressing the media at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time on Friday. Producer Vic was losing his mind in our group chat saying, uh-oh, Shanny is coming back. But is this good news for Shanny? How'd you read it all?
Well, if they had a clear-cut decision to can the guy, I don't think that announcement would be made. So that's a glimmer of hope for Shanahan. But I don't think it's set in stone what that means yet. You could speculate, no doubt. It obviously means they haven't fired him yesterday, but it's interesting. I don't know what the behind the doors conversations are. Like, who is Tree Living going to report to? Is it Shanahan? Or I could see them putting Shanahan in a different position where maybe it's, not so hands-on and he doesn't have the final say. Maybe what that looks like, I don't know. I mean, you look at different organizations like the Flyers, for example, who I was a part of. Up in their offices, they have guys walking around left, right, and center that you recognize, and you're like, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? None of them have, actual hands on the team, but they're still there and they still are on payroll. So he, just because he's not kicked to the curb, I don't think means necessarily that he's still going to have as much influence on this team as he used to. But maybe it'll be exactly business as usual. I have no idea. That's why we're going to wait and watch.
The fascinating thing to me is Keith Pelly in this entire situation, because ever since taking this job, he's been really, really behind the scenes, really hasn't made many public outings. Nobody knows how he feels. Nobody knows how he thinks. I'm just curious to hear from him and his outlook for this team and this organization. I mean, we laid out the numbers yesterday, Rosie, on Brendan Shanahan. It's been a decade. And I know his part of the game, and quite frankly, I have no clue what his day-to-day operations are. But his is more focused on making money as opposed to what happens on the ice, albeit he is the key cog. He is the high-end guy who is given the authority to make decisions. So I think you play the blame game and the fault game. I think Shanny's involved in that process at the very least.
Oh, I would sure think so. The direction he's gone, it was named the Shanna plan, and it has not worked out. Plain and simple, not worked out at all. It's been disappointing. So obviously that's going to play into it. Yeah, with Pelly coming in, like, he hasn't been there pulling his hair out. It's different when guys have been there just a short amount of time. The fact that people are saying that Tree Living might be gone, like, are you out of your minds? This isn't like a complete knee jerk, like what the hell does Tree Living have to do with anything? He had one summer to make moves, and the guys that he brought in made an instant and immediate impact at the time when it matters. So why would, like, one season for Tree Living and then can him to bring in who to do what? Like, crazy to me. Like, he's not going anywhere. That would be asinine. But I remember, just because, like, I remember last year at this time, I thought they were going to fire Keefe and I thought they were going to keep Dubas. They did the opposite. And, like, just because Dubas goes away, it's like, okay, but he's still, his whole image of the team is still sitting there in the locker room, right? So it doesn't change that much. You bring in another guy to make some moves, but I really think that, in my mind, I would like to see Tree Living have autonomy to move this thing around as he wishes. He's a general manager. That's a definition of the job. I don't want, like, what's the point of even having him? And we said this about Dubas, if Shanahan's going to make all the calls, and then if Pelly's going to make all the calls, like, what the hell's even the point? Just don't show up to work. Nothing you do matters because someone else is just going to veto it or tell you to do something different. So I hope it's not that situation. I know Pelly likes to be a little bit hands-on, I hear. And I mean, if his job is to make money, then he's got a pretty easy job, like, let's be honest here. And why wouldn't you want to make even more money by doing whatever you have to do to win the Stanley Cup? And that would just be like, put that city and that team over the top. But yeah, lots of interesting questions and takes and thoughts on what's going to happen, what it's going to look like. And I think, hopefully that'll all come clear after that presser.
Here's a good question. You're a media member in that room on Friday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. What are a couple questions you're going to ask, whether it's Keith Pelly, Brendan Shanahan, or Brad Tree Living?
Oh, to those guys?
Yeah,
good question. It would be like how has this happened? What do you see the problem is? Like, what in your opinion is the problem? Why can't you get over the hump? And I want to hear the answer. And then obviously, how many changes in your mind need to be made in order to get there? And I think you'll get a bit of an understanding on, are they running it back, or did they feel this is as unacceptable as anybody? Do they think it's time for change? Have they run out of patience, or do they think they're right there? That's the questions I'd try to get out of them, and I think that's easier said than done.
Hi, Brad Tree Living, Nick Alberga from Leafs Morning Take. Do you still believe in the core four? I think everything, like, if we're going to talk about locker cleanout day, but it was like Operation protect the image of Mitch Marner. It just seemed that way. It was rehearsed. I mean, we're going to get to that whole situation momentarily, but I want to know first and foremost, are these guys open to doing something drastic? And I understand Mitch Marner sort of controls his destiny, but the Leafs also control the fact that Mitch Marner might not be able to get an 8th year on his next contract, right? I think if they say, hey, we're going to hold on to you, you can be a free agent next summer, he's only getting 7 years. So the Leafs do have a bit in their court, but I think profoundly people want to know, are they open? Are they willing? I know we heard all this conversation last year before Kyle Dubas was let go, that there was a willingness to be open to, at the very least, talking trade. And maybe it was a bit different because they had that pocket where Marner was able to go. I think the Nylander conversation was certainly there. This year is a bit different, but I want to know that first and foremost from Brad Treliving.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to too. And I don't know. People talk to core four, like break it down. Who's the core four? Okay. Matthews not going anywhere. He just signed an extension. He's your franchise. William Nylander just signed a fat extension and he showed up in the playoffs. People are happy with him. He's not going anywhere. Tavares is your captain. He's aging. He makes $11 million a year. He's way overpaid. How the hell are you going to stretch him into a deal to get him gone? And that leaves one guy. And it happens to be the guy who pathetically underperformed the entire playoffs. So it's pretty easy. Are you going to move Mitch Marner or not? Are you going to try to move Mitch Marner or not? And I know he has a no trade contract clause, but a lot of times that clause is just like you have control over where you go and the team doesn't want you anymore. Like it's pretty rare a guy's just digging his heels and they're like, we don't want you here. Our plans don't include here. Our fan base doesn't want you. It's not working. You need to change the scenery. We need to change the scenery. What teams do you want to go to? Nope, I'm staying. I'm playing. Like it's pretty rare that happens, right? So it's more of you have control over what happens, as far as you can't just get a phone call and say, well, you're off to Columbus. Like you get a say in how it happens. That's kind of the perk of having that in my mind. So that's the question. Are you moving Mitch or not? Are you going to try to move Mitch or not? Are you going to talk to Mitch about getting moved or not?
Numbers game for sure. And I was a bit perplexed. Again, we're going to get to this whole story right now. It takes hard work and determination to bring home the cup. Luckily, all you need to do to bring home Wendy's rewards points is eat. Just download the Wendy's app, place your favorite order, and you'll be well on the road to victory. And by victory, we mean free food. What are you waiting for? Download the Wendy's app and start earning on every order today. Since we're on Mitch Marner, very curious when I heard the comment and saw the comment, what your reaction was going to be. So Mitch Marner was asked pretty much what it meant to be a Maple Leaf. And he says, it means the world. Obviously, we're looked upon as, kind of gods here, to be honest. Are you an atheist, Rosie?
I'm agnostic. That means I don't know. Yeah, he took a ton of heat, man. Poor choice of words. A strong word to use for a guy where he is built up very high and has this big status, and then fear infuriates the fans by not producing. So to use that word, very poor choice of words for a guy who should be trained better in the media. But he didn't say he's a god. He didn't say he thinks he's a god. He doesn't. It was taken out of context by a lot of people in the comments. His whole point of saying that was, I like it in Toronto. The people here treat you so well that it's comforting and it's incredible to be a Maple Leaf. They treat you like you're a god. They treat you in this highest regard. They revere you. Little kids eyes get wide and they fucking freeze when they see a Maple Leaf come out of the building. That's what he's saying. And I get it. And it's not the worst thing in the world to say, yet he shouldn't have said it. And of course, in this market, when everyone's already pissed off at you and wanting your head on a platter, to say, even use the word God in any reference to yourself is probably going to be turned on you for the worse. But I'm not the one that's going to tear him and twist his words and take things out of context, because I completely understand what he was saying. I just think again, what does that show? Immaturity, maybe, that he used those words at a press conference at that time of the year with his position that he was standing in. So I went online. I'm like, I get it. I see the hate. I see people losing their marbles, wanting this guy's head on a platter. Poor choice of words, but no, he did not say he's a god. He didn't refer to himself as a god. He said that's how he gets treated by this fan base. He was trying to be complimentary to the city, to the fan base, to everyone that believes, and it blew up in his face, obviously, but I'm not the one who's tearing him down for that comment.
And the other thing that I pulled from the Mitch Marner scrum was, again, every media member asks the same type of questions. I get it about the core four. Do you guys think it's possible? It's capable? Can you win with the core four? And his answer is yeah, because we're stars. Like that. That's why they're gonna win, because those guys are stars. I don't know. I agree with you wholeheartedly, dude. and you'd be the last guy to defend Mitch Marner. I think it was just a poor choice of words, but I still sense delusion, entitlement in a lot of what he said yesterday. Like, for once, and again, I always do this every year, admittedly, where I overreact to locker room cleanout day. What are these guys going to tell you? It felt rehearsed. It felt like it was a coaching session before, and said, you guys are going to be asked about this. Be prepared. But would it hurt somebody just to come out and be like, this is unacceptable, I need to be better? Instead, Mitch Marner comes out and he credits the Boston Bruins. Like, I can't take that shit. He credit the Boston Bruins. They're a good team. They play a great defensive game. Mitch, why does this happen against every fucking team in the playoffs where you cannot produce? Is it because they're Boston every time? No, it's not.
I don't know. They're like, what could he say that wouldn't lead
Nothing.
to scrutiny?
Yeah.
You could scrutinize it. He could say, I'm not good enough, but he admits it. He knows he's not good enough. Like, it would just, nothing he could say would save him in this market. And that's part of being in it. It's part of the toughness that it is to deal with, especially media day after you get beat out. But yeah, I was more perturbed by that than the God comment when he's like, why do you guys believe in the core four or whatever? And he's like, because we're phenomenal hockey players or whatever he said. It's just like, then why are you never a phenomenal hockey player in the playoffs? Why do you never win if you're all like, you literally have four of the big, like, we call it the core four. You're the most heavily stacked team on offense that you could put together on paper, and you cannot do a goddamn thing in the playoffs. You can't score more than 2 goals. Like, that is the anomaly that we are in. And every time you go to blow it up, you're like, oh, but they're really talented and this can't last forever and they got to get it done. And we believe in them. Like, this doesn't make sense. Look how good they are. Austin Matthews with Nylander and Marner, and they can set each other up and they can totally dominate and get so many points and totally be awesome. And it's just like, they've done that for so many years and it just doesn't work. I don't know why it doesn't work. Sometimes, like, ingredients to bake something or whatever, sometimes things just go together and you're like, holy smokes, does that taste good? Like, all together, that makes something incredible. And you put other things together and you're like, that tastes like shit. I think this core four just tastes like shit. It just doesn't work together. There's no chemistry. It doesn't work, man. Like, every time they get to the playoffs and they can't do it. I don't know why that is. It is a bloody anomaly to me how they don't score more goals, but they don't. So how many times do you run it back? They've already done it. We've already been in this position. Oh my God, they're running it back. Oh my God, they're running it back. Okay. I really think, okay, it's time we can't run it back. And you kind of are. I mean, you're still keeping 3. The only one I'm suggesting try to move is one of them. And it's because it makes sense, because his contract is set up where it's up and you need to do something with him. And also, he's the guy who was the least impressive in the playoffs and the most frustrating and gave you the least. So, case closed, in my opinion. Make a move, get it done however you need to do it. But it's just wild to try to think of how they can't perform in the playoffs, man.
I'm tired of crediting the opposition. I really am. And like you, that comment stood out more than the God comment. But it's like, you're a star, but like, you don't perform like a star. And it's like, oh, let's credit the Boston Bruins. But you do this every spring, Mitch. It's not just the Boston Bruins. So I can't justify that. As I mentioned, it's team coached. You heard from Nylander, you heard from Matthews. They were quick to come to the defense. I mean, what else are they going to say? What else are they going to do? Again, Rosie, how often have we questioned the accountability? And that comes from the top all the way to Shanahan, to Keefe, to the players. I didn't sense any accountability for a first round exit, a game 7 loss again, which that's the one thing I want from the next head coach at the very least. If Shanahan's not going, accountability has to be something we talk about on the norm here.
I know. And I remember what it's like in that room, and you don't like you're getting hammered with negativity, so you need to like put up a shield, right? And you can't just absorb all that and then be part of it, or it would just be like, you might as well light the building on fire. Like, it's you.
Yeah.
I get what it's like to kind of be like, hey, you're going to be come at with a million different things. It's all going to be negative. It's all going to be strong. Stick together, support each other. Although it's not good enough, you know that, recognize that, but like, reiterate the fact that you guys believe in each other, you love each other. You are a team. Don't let that go now. So that's why you get those answers. And yeah, they're frustrating. And what would happen if Morgan Riley just said, it's not good enough. This is a joke. We can't keep doing this. It's not acceptable. like everyone would go nuts with it, and the management would be like, "What are you trying to force our hand here?" Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just
Yes.
hard, and they're gonna give the answers that make the most sense to them in that room. And unfortunately for us that want accountability and stuff, that is putting up a shield and kind of protecting themselves from the barrage of negativity that comes at them at this time of year for the 10th time, right? What
Did you
about Austin?
catch? Pardon
Sorry,
me.
Austin's comments bothered me more than anything. Like, what happened there? Like, it's not. It doesn't matter now. Why don't you just tell us what the fuck you had, man? Oh, it's just illness, and then took a hit, and just that's all I'll say. What? That's less than what we knew in the first place. What kind of illness? What does the hit have to do with the illness? Like double whammy? You were sick and got hurt. Like, why don't you just say it? What could you possibly be sacrificing to say? I had this virus that the doctors think is this X virus from this place that no one really knows about, but it puts you on your absolute ass. Like, I couldn't move physically. We were pumping IVs in me, doing all the vitamin drips and stuff, trying to get me going. I tried to play, and when I did, I wasn't myself by any stretch. I got hammered, felt like my shoulder might have like a small separation to it. I was just a disaster, and we decided the team was better off, putting someone else in than having me be basically, non-existent out there. And it was terrible and frustrating, but I cannot believe the timing of it. I'm absolutely sick to my stomach about it. Boom. Thanks, Austin. Awesome. Let's move on. Like, what's with the crypticness? What do they get out of that?
Dude, I have no answer, and all I could think about is like every other team, locker room cleanout day, you pretty much find out the laundry list of injuries. With the Leafs yesterday, we knew already the whole Nylander thing. I didn't hear from Joseph Wall. I don't know if he spoke. There was
Yeah.
absolutely no clarity on the injury front, and you're so right. I think it adds to the mayhem and the drama surrounding the team when they pull this stuff. But yeah, I was perplexed. I thought we get some clarity on Matthews, but I guess we're not ever going to get an answer on what the hell happened.
And same thing with Wool. Like your star goalie, who everyone's just fawning over what he's done in order to get you back and make this historic comeback and finally put the Bruins on their ass. And holy smokes, could this be something special? They finally found it. This goalie emerged. They're playing really good hockey. Everyone was super excited after winning game 5 and 6. And then your goalie can't play inexplicably. What are you talking about? No clarification on that whatsoever. So now the rest of the season, what do you open him up to? Scrutiny over, oh, he can't, he's a band-aid, and he's always hurt, and that's going to define his career, and you can't trust him, and we got to go get a goalie. Why don't you just give some clarification on what happened to maybe avoid some of that scrutiny? It doesn't help them at all. I don't see a reason why they'd be so cryptic about their injuries. It's ridiculous.
The Leafs just can't stay out of their own way. Did you catch the Keefe presser? He looked very overwhelmed with emotion. He took responsibility. Again, you talk about accountability. At least one person, and maybe it's the guy who's on the outbound, and presumably he's going to get axed in the next couple of days. That's just the way it works. And I think everything he said just leads you down that road. But what did you make of his words and his thoughts on the season?
Yeah, it was pretty honest, pretty forthright. He did take some accountability, which was nice. I don't think anyone's ripping on him right now about it. You kind of feel for him in a sense. Like, it's a big deal to be part of that organization, and as long as he has, and to be the head coach, like, I can't even imagine how many hours and worries and you know just stress that guy's gone through in the years that he's coached. It would be all encompassing and all consuming. And with his kids and the things you miss, and the just what you have to put into that job, would be no wonder he gets emotional, right? And then to think that all you've done and all you hoped for, and now it might be over, and you're never going to walk into that room again, you're never going to wear that jacket, you're never going to be part of that big machine again. Very sad, very emotional for him, I'm sure, and disappointing that they didn't get the job done, that he won't be remembered as a winner there. So I totally understand the emotion that he would feel there. And, again, he took some accountability, and, the captain of the ship, he took that role, and, talked about how it doesn't matter what happened, it starts with me, all the right things to say. It's hard not to like the guy. But I think at the end of the day, just a coaching change is necessary for the team. And I think he knows that.
The coach is always easiest scapegoat. At the end of the day, who do you think that should take the most heat for this loss? That's what I've been trying to quantify the last couple of days, because it's so easy to blame the coach, but all I see is a team that scored 12 goals in 7 games.
Yeah, it's not one person. I mean, I've been hardest on Mitch because I feel like the effort wasn't there to desperately do anything to get there. That's what bothers me. I feel like Keefe, it's on him as well because I don't think he demanded enough accountability. I don't think he got the most out of the players. You could blame Shanahan because he was the architect of wanting this team to be this way, and you almost can't blame him because it's like, well, you wanted a really highly offensive team. Was the risk in that not scoring any goals in the playoffs? No, the risk in that was having to win 6-5 every game, which they haven't. Like, imagine they scored 4, 5, 6 goals every single playoff game. They would smoke teams. So, like, that in theory, it should have kind of worked. Your defense and goaltenders were good enough in the playoffs, obviously. Who would have thought you couldn't score any goals? It's crazy. It's like mind meltingly crazy that they were that that offensively hamstrung. It just blows my mind. So a bit of him maybe, and then just go down the line, man. It's a little bit of everything.
It sure is. Let's get to today's guests and break down and dissect what we've seen the last couple of days and the follow-up from all this. This segment is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. Get custom ring build and deliver in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece program and an unbeatable pricing policy. For more information, go to charmdiamondcenters.com. As you get to Frank Seravalli. Frank, thank you so much for doing this. I was going to get a mariachi band, but I'm going to get Jay Rosehill to sing you a happy birthday. Happy birthday, dude.
Thanks. Yeah, please don't do that.
Happy, and I'll drag it out for as long as possible.
No. We're
Happy
good on
birthday,
that.
Frank.
Thanks, buddy.
So, Frank, thank you so much for doing this on your birthday, no less. What have you made of, say, the last couple weeks here in Toronto?
Geez, could you get it any more broad than that?
It's crazy, right?
Where do I begin? I think, when you look at the last couple weeks, maybe not all that surprising. I don't know that any Leaf fan went into this playoff with any realistic high expectations that this would be the year that they'd break through and win the Stanley Cup. I think that's probably fair to say. That said, certainly showed at least some sign of fight, some pulse in getting to Game 7 before yet again the disappointment that comes through from this team time and time again, it feels like. And now as you begin to unpack all of that and what it means, I just think the easiest way to do it is to ask a real simple question. Are you helping our team win or not? And if the answer is no, then I think you've got to make critical changes to this team that would indicate we have a collection here of players now that are going to help us win. And I think we've seen a big enough, long enough sample size to be able to make those judgments accordingly.
So when you ask that question, if you ask yourself that question, what immediately comes to mind of a person or people that are not helping this team win?
Well, I mean, it's pretty clear and abundantly obvious to me that Mitch Marner falls into that category. I don't care what his points per game are like in the playoffs. He's not helping the Toronto Maple Leafs win when it matters most. He's helping them get there. Fantastic regular season player, has piled up points, like very few in the NHL over the last number of years. And he cares, but I think it's too far gone. I think when you see him play in the playoffs, everything about him changes. It's his body language changes. His sphincter tightens at Scotiabank Arena when it comes to the postseason, and that's no good. I don't know that you can work your way out or play your way out of that. Austin Matthews, he had a few games this series before getting hurt / ill that he made his mark on the series. William Nylander is the one guy I've never really questioned when it comes to playoff performance. And then you could say what you want about John Tavares and the contract, which we all know he's not playing at a level up to that right now, but he still contributed to and was part of a couple game winners in this series. So the Tavares situation is going to sort itself out. Matthews is re-signed. When you look at Nylander, he's re-signed for the foreseeable future. We've now got one player who is not just a square peg in a round hole, but has also arrived at a critical juncture this offseason where it's time to make a change. And so it kind of actually, in some ways, the picture becomes really clear to me. The question is, will the Toronto Maple Leafs act on it? Are they seeing it as clearly as everyone else is?
Can you outline the process behind the scenes? Let's say, I mean, there is momentum on something with the Marner camp sort of approach. Like, how do you think the next couple months would be handled from those parts? Will we hear anything public, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll begin to hear some things public if that's the path that the Leafs want to go down. But Nick, I've heard so much talk about no move clauses and how that might get in the way. I'm sorry, like maybe I'm ruthless, but I don't buy that for 1 second that that's going to be an issue here.
Because they're going to ask, and what is he going to do? Dig his heels in and say, no, I'm going to be here even though nobody wants me? Is that kind of what you're referring to?
It's even more simple than that, Rosie. What I would say is, let's put yourself and let's just say that it's handled more deftly than this, but for conversation's sake and for simplicity's sake, let's say the conversation goes something like this. Hey, Mitch, appreciate everything that you've done for our franchise the last number of years. However, at the end of next season, there is a 0.0% chance that we are re-signing you to a long-term extension. So therefore, your options are twofold. You can, one, dig your heels in and play out a contract year on a team that clearly doesn't want you here and a marketplace that has grown tired of you in an all-important contract year, by the way. Or you can work with us to facilitate a move somewhere else, because at some point this Band-Aid's getting ripped off one way or the other, whether you like it or not. And I think you have to approach the conversation as bluntly as that if that's the path that you want to go down, because that's the way you have to handle this. It's not going to be easy. And you have a guy that expressed yesterday that he wants to stay in Toronto for the long term. And that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, performance is what matters. And performance, when it matters most, matters more than anything.
And for him to be in a contract year in his prime, he's going to sit down with his agent and say, here's the position we're in. What makes most sense for you to go out, have a good season, get to a place where you're happy, that's willing to pay you max dollar at the end of this season, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that if that's exactly the way the conversation goes, that any agent worth his salt is going to sit back and say, ooh, man, really tough situation that we're in here. Contract year. We need to have a good year, especially after the way these playoffs went. No one's going to say to their client, yeah, you know what? Tell them to bleep off and we're playing here next year no matter what. I can't imagine that that's the case. So there's been so much ink spilled, so much time spent already in the last 7 days talking about these no move clauses. I just gave you one example, and there's many ways to do it, of how to navigate around it.
And naturally, it's a big contract to move to. I know there's 1 year left, but you start thinking about fit. Like, how would it work behind the scenes too? Would a GM text another GM, text Treliving and say, hey, if you're open to this, we'd be willing to talk about Marner if he's open to it? Do you see a couple of examples out there of teams that could make sense? Like for me, Nashville's the one that always comes up.
Why Nashville?
Saros?
I mean, I guess. I don't know that you even need to go down the Saros path with Joe Wall being ready to go. And that 1 more year to really bargain contract. You're going to have to then pay Saros. So Nashville wouldn't be at the top of the list for me. I would look at, I don't know, let's say Utah. Team on the rise, team that has cap space and could afford the contract, team that clearly wants to make a splash, team that has tons of picks and prospects to move, not to mention some healthy roster players that you could send back the other way. Like, I think a lot of people have also then begun to paint this situation as like, oh, well, because he had a bad playoffs means that Mitch Marner doesn't have value and the Leafs are going to have to, I've seen it both ways. Either the Leafs are getting an absolute haul for Mitch Marner, or that there's, teams out there that could be on the bargain hunt to see if they could get him at a low cost. I think the answer is probably going to be somewhere in the middle because of the contract, because of the commitment that would need to be made on the other end of it if you want to re-sign him. And that's really where his leverage would come in, is basically being able to indicate to a team, hey, I'm not going to be re-signing with you. That's what would kill a deal. And that's where he's got the ability to, stop it from even beginning to spin. So there's lots of, different avenues, but that's, at least right off the top of my head, that's one team that stands out.
So do you think a deal could get made without him being re-signed? Like, you think it would be like, oh, we announce Mitch Marner gets traded to Utah and he signed an XYZ extension, like that type of thing? Because you'd think a team would want that. Mitch would want that. Mitch doesn't want to go to Utah and then pack up and go to there, and then all of a
Maybe.
sudden,
How do we know what Mitch wants? Maybe he wants to have a fantastic year and then have the entire deck open to him outside of Toronto.
maybe obviously
What's the harm? I mean, he's already made a pile of money. He's secure for life. Why not just enjoy the ride from here on in? You've played for your hometown team. Hasn't worked out the way you envisioned it might all the time. And then what?
But
Why not?
players don't think that way. They don't think, I've made lots of money, I'm going to enjoy the ride. I mean,
They
you might
should.
think that
That's
because
how I would think.
it's all relative. But that guy wants to maximize every goddamn dollar he makes. He's looking at everybody above him and trying to get there.
Maybe that's part of the problem.
So let's keep in mind with Leafs Nation that, when a deal gets done, if it gets done, the return, you also have to factor in the fact that one of the assets of making a deal is opening up his cap space, which in turn, I know we're going to get something back for Mitch, but what you also get back is whoever you sign with that cap space, correct?
Yeah, and that's another really important thing that I'm glad you pointed out, is because so many people would look at a transaction like that and say, "Oh, can't believe that's, depending on what it is, can't believe that's all we got." There's a win in having cap flexibility if you were able to create some. And look, the Leafs are getting some anyway. You've got the TJ Brody contract coming off the books. Let's see what happens with Domi and Bertuzzi, although they both, certainly made their mark in the second half of the season. Let's see what happens with some of the other guys that, you could be making changes to your roster with. And also, let's see what kind of an impact, if you decide to make the coaching change, which I think we're all expecting to happen. What does the new coach and the aura that surrounds him, what does that have on the gravitational pull of what happens next? Whether it's his influence on the transactions that come next, or whether it's personal connections that he has. Like, there's a lot of, we haven't even seen the cards come out of the chute yet. That's how new this is. Then there's lots of opportunity to play them.
You talked about it. Is Sheldon Keefe done? And what are the chances, if he is done, that it's Craig Berube as the new head coach?
I would say the likelihood is very strong that the Leafs make a coaching change. Now, when it comes to Craig Berube, I'm just not convinced that he's going to be on the market long enough to get to Toronto. I think he's on their list, or would be on their list of candidates, but I think he's, I guess the proper way to frame it would be, I think he's certainly very high on the New Jersey Devils list, and I'm not sold that he makes it to the end of this week, and that the Leafs may not even have begun their process yet, and he could be off the table.
Interesting. What about we got a press conference coming up with management and ownership, and Sheldon Keefe's, Brendan Shanahan's involved in that, obviously. How much do you think, what do you think is going to happen with him? How much is he to blame? Is he going to be part of the process? And what do you read into the fact that they've already announced that he will be part of that press conference?
It's hard to really read into much in a press release. What I would say is the fact that he's planning to be there and have a seat at the table would seem to indicate that he's not going anywhere, which at least answers one of the questions that's sort of been lingering. New president of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, Keith Pelly, he comes in. What's his relationship like with Shanahan? What questions has he asked? I'm told that MLSE began to have meetings internally last week when the Leafs went down 3-1 in the series, to already start to begin asking questions. Maybe not much of a surprise there, but to me, the way I look at this offseason is just about everything needs to be on the table. I mean, we're approaching 10 years now of everything that's unfolded here. And Just look at the division around you now. There's been all this talk about, oh man, the Bruins. I can't believe we run into the Bruins every year, or the Lightning, or whoever it might be. Well, like 10 years ago, the Florida Panthers were a laughing stock in their division. Why have the Panthers so far past you now? Why are they now considered one of the beasts of the East? And it's not just one team. I guess it's my point to show that I think there's been lots of, sort of stagnant water here when it comes to making changes. They've talked themselves into pretzels of, well, this isn't working, but, we might be a worse team if we make this trade and pry off a good player from our core. How much more evidence do you need? There's something broken with this team when it comes to the playoffs. Their high water mark, oddly enough, came against the Panthers last year, is 5 of the 16 wins required. In my opinion, the only question, we talked in the beginning about a simple way to evaluate this offseason. Does this player or person help you win? I can take it one step further. When you're evaluating the overall health of your team, are we an authentic threat to win the Stanley Cup? And I think universally, even the most diehard Leaf fan would say this year, not a threat to win. How does that change? How do you begin to go about answering the question of, yes, we are? And I think there's so many different facets to this. We could spend a billion hours talking about this, but the scariest part to me for the Toronto Maple Leafs when it comes to their playoff exit is that this is a defense core that is so wildly undermanned, and yet that is not the reason they did not make it out of the first round this year. The fact that they have this core and can't score is incredibly alarming. How do you rejig the wheel? How do you redo your cap table, so that you're not in the same position moving forward? Those are the questions to ask.
Isn't that the anomaly of this whole situation, is that they built a team to score a ton of goals, and everyone said, well, that's not how you win. But they said, too bad, we're going to be so good, we're going to do it anyway. They invested in these 4 guys, these superstars, and they were going to outscore their opponent. And everyone said, well, you don't have a goalie, you don't have good enough defense core. And then they go about their business, and every year they can't score any goals. Like, isn't that just mind-blowing?
It's not an anomaly. What that is a colossal failure. That's a failure on many levels, and it's not just a fluke.
But don't you think the way they would lose if you didn't agree with that system is they would, lose 6-5 and 5-4, and they would be a high output scoring machine, but not enough defense, yet they're losing 2-1
then it'd be easy to
game.
fix. I think then you turn around and you say, okay, well, we've got the scoring part figured out. Now we can fix our back end a little bit.
Right, but that's not where they're at. So isn't this an anomaly of going, what the hell do we do? Do we go get more offensive players, like, and do the Shanna plan again with different players and get a high octane offense to try to score?
I think you need a better balanced team overall. I think we've been saying that forever. Not only do you need to reinvent the defense core of this team, but you also need to reimagine what the forward group looks like. And it's not just core players. The Leafs bottom 6 has been lacking for years because they just don't have the wherewithal, cap flexibility wise, to be able to pull it off. And you can try and mine, the Michael Buntings, the pick the flavor of the season, the Zach Hymans, whoever it is. But at some point you can't afford to keep those guys and they're gone. And so that becomes the nature of the reality, is you're constantly shuffling players in and out. And guess what? You're not going to find one of those guys every year. You're going to find one of those guys once every 5 years. And the whole puzzle begins to get really difficult to put together.
Yeah, and to me, it's a delusion, guys. Like, a lot of the guys on Locker Cleanout Day are like, we're close. Close to what exactly? I mean, winning a playoff. You're not close anywhere close to winning.
That's the saddest part of what I heard, not just from Locker Cleanout Day, Nick, but just even in the immediate aftermath of Game 7. We were so bleeping close, Willie Nylander said. Bleeping close to what? You say that when you lose in Game 7 of the Cup final. You say that when you lose in Game 7 maybe of the conference final. But 3 of the 16 wins required. Like, what are we talking about here? This is how low, impossibly low, the bar has been set for this franchise, which is just how happy was everyone to win one round to then basically have shot your load last year when you get to the second, that you get your doors blown off by the Florida Panthers in round 2.
Yeah, I agree. They're nowhere close. A lot of people in the chat asking about Joel Quenneville. Is he a guy that's ever going to be reinstated?
Well, I think first off, when it comes to Joel Quenneville, what he deserves more than anything is a sentence. I don't know about you guys, but the way the justice system works here in the US is you commit a crime, which by the way, he didn't do, but just for, hypothetical and reasoning, you commit a crime, you get a sentence, and you know how long you go to jail, even if it's for life. But in this court, in the court of the commissioner of the NHL, Gary Bettman, you are suspended indefinitely and you have no date of return. You have no date of hearing, in fact. You have no date when that question will even be answered. That's the most ridiculous part to me. If you want to say that Joel Quenneville is out of the league for life, it's a statement I wouldn't agree with, but at least he would have been given a sentence. And I don't know how that part is arguable. Maybe, you can argue about whether he should or shouldn't be back, whether, the 3 years that he's now sat out of the NHL, is that enough? We could debate that till you're blue in the face. But that he deserves a sentence, to me, is inarguable. And I think at some point, with the work that he's done behind the scenes, with the work that Stan Bowman has done, this is a real conversation and question as we enter yet another hiring season that should be had, because, the people who actually do commit crimes and go to jail, when they get out, they have a right to earn a living again. And these people haven't committed crimes and yet have not had a right to earn a living in the NHL. And some people would say, oh, but it's a privilege, not a right. I guess, but we're also talking about restricting someone's ability to earn a living.
Very bizarre. Frank, awesome stuff today, man. Happy birthday. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks, Frank.
Frank Seravalli, and make sure just to keep it locked on Frank's socials and the Daily Faceoff show. Just bringing the heat. That was a fun conversation, man. There's a lot to unpack, Rosie, from everything we talked about, from Marner to Berube, Joel Quenneville. Like, Frank's talking like maybe Berube doesn't get to market here. Maybe he gets to Jersey. So, like, who could the guy be for the Maple Leafs then? Like, I start to wonder if it's not going to be Q. Is there anybody out there? Claude Julien?
Yeah, I mean, there are guys out there, but not that anyone's been kind of seriously talking about. I'm Quenneville. I think that he coached a modern day dynasty in Chicago. He's been in the game for 40 years. He has a sterling reputation, and we live in a woke culture day where a 60-year-old guy didn't handle the most insane situation the guy could ever think he would come across in all of his years of hockey. He didn't handle it the way everyone wanted. So let's just pitchfork and crucify him. I don't agree with it. And I agree with Frank. That's a good point. I wonder if Quenneville's not really, petitioning to get back into the league because he's kind of feeling it out, seeing what not even sure if he knows what he wants to do. But it certainly needs to be put to bed. What's this guy's deal? Is he allowed to coach? Is he not? How long? Like, put something down on paper that now people know. But to me, I don't follow the narrative of people with the pitchfork saying, twisting it into something that it probably wasn't. Was he perfect in his situation? Did he handle it perfectly? No, I doubt it. But guess what? I don't think a lot of people would have, because back then when that happened, that it was completely off the mark, and a guy like him wouldn't have a clue how to handle it according to today's standards. So give your head a shake on that. He's a good man. That he's got a 40-year track record to prove that. So he's my guy, and I would like to know what the story is with him. And it seems like everyone's kind of leaned towards Craig Berube. I'm not sure if I believe that all the way. I think like there's been reports of them chatting and stuff. Like if he wanted to coach the Leafs, I think he would wait and press their hand and say, what's the story? And they would touch base and see where they're at. I can't imagine he was dying to be the Leafs coach. They would love to have him. He's their first choice. And, we ran out of time. I signed with New Jersey. Like, no, that's not how how it works with a decision of that magnitude. But if maybe he doesn't want anything to do with that, maybe he doesn't want to be in that market, doesn't want the scrutiny. I don't know. We will see. But yeah, if it's neither of those guys, it opens up a whole new, holy smokes, we got to go back to the drawing board and figure out who could coach this team.
Tell you right now, if I had to handicap things, it's going to be Craig Berube. He's the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. You're telling me there hasn't been some smoke signals sent out there? You don't think the Leafs have made a decision that Sheldon Keefe's not coming back? That's what's killing me. It's like, what's taking so long? They paraded this guy out on Monday for the press. Like, there's no way. I mean, anybody who watched this team, there's no way that Sheldon Keefe is back. I mean, we fucking talked about it 5 months ago. He should be done. I think sometimes you need a coaching change. We've reached that road. I guarantee you there's been at least smoke signals sent to the Berube camp, and the New Jersey job has been open for weeks now. Like, I don't buy that. I think New Jersey's in there, but I think when you look at Berube, go look at his comments, Rosie, on our show in January. Go look at the fact that there's been multiple openings in Ottawa and Buffalo and New Jersey, and for some reason hasn't made a decision. I think this is the job he wants, just sheer speculation on my part, and I think it's going to be Berube.
I mean, I don't know what Berube wants, but the only way that he goes and signs with a team like New Jersey is if they've already talked and it's not going to happen, whether Berube doesn't want it or the Leafs for some reason don't want him. That's the only way he would go and sign with New Jersey on Friday, not because, I panicked and ran out of time. The window was closing and I really wanted to, but we just ran, not a chance, man. It's not, there's no timeline on this shit. So I think if he doesn't become the coach, it's because one of the parties didn't want him. If both of them want it, it'll be a done deal. And I don't know, it's only been 2 days, so I'm not sitting here going, what's the hold up? It's literally not really a time panic, except for the fact that, maybe he wants to get going with the process of a new team. So we will see, man. And the guys that I played for Craig Berube for a year, I guess more when he was assistant and stuff, and I've talked to guys that have played for him and they like him, and I think he can demand more accountability, and I think it's just going to be a change of pace if he does come in, obviously. So yeah, interesting times, and we'll see what happens. I think they're going to wait till that press conference is over and tell everyone where their heads are at, and then hammer down with actually making some moves.
Yeah, just speculation. I would assume over the next couple of days, we're going to hear the fate of Sheldon Keefe. I do not know what needs to transpire behind the scenes. Just look at the way Keefe was answering questions after Game 7, how emotional he was on Monday. It's like, just do it already. I just don't know what is taking so long on that front. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. So a couple more games. Game 1's coming up tonight in round 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Actually, there's a game 2. No, never mind. I'm looking at the wrong schedule. There is a game 2. Rangers hosting the Carolina Hurricanes, and Colorado at Dallas. Probably one of the 4 series I'm looking forward to the most. I don't know what's going to transpire there, but I actually like the over. I'm expecting a bit of chaos to start that Colorado-Dallas series tonight.
Yeah, interesting. I'll be looking at that one too. Colorado was Colorado in that Winnipeg series. And Dallas, I thought was, especially I can't say I watched like the whole series back to back. But when it was time for Vegas to put the hammer down and tilt the ice and stuff, Dallas still had complete control. I think they're a pretty solid team who knows who they are. So yeah, that'll be a pretty interesting series. I like that.
Big time cojones by Dallas too. I mean, they lost the first 2 games on home ice in that series with Vegas and end up winning the series. And you talk about a team who direly needed to find a way to beat that Vegas team, especially with Mark Stone back and Hannafin in the mix and Hurdle, like all the moves that team has made. Really, really impressive stuff. So looking forward to that. And also looking forward to your return on Thursday to this show, Rosie. I think the latter half of this week is going to be mighty fascinating here.
I think you got your days mixed up, buddy, but I will be
here
tomorrow.
You're in the mix tomorrow?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, my bad. I just can't keep tabs on the schedule. So Rosie's back tomorrow. We're going to continue to break down what's been transpiring over the last little while. And obviously, if anything breaks, we'll have you covered here at Leafs Morning Take at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button, Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Many thanks to Frank Seravalli, the birthday boy, for dropping by, dissecting everything's to come possibly with this franchise, from Marner to Berube to Sheldon Keefe to Brendan Shanahan's future. We even touched on Joel Quenville, and of course, producer Vic. You are the best. We'll talk on Wednesday, everybody. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.